15 names, the biggest in rock history, the kind of legends that don't get questioned, because questioning them feels almost blasphemous. But every single one of them had something underneath the mythology, something that, when it came out, changed everything. Some never recovered, and none of them were exactly who we thought they were. This is what the biopics leave out. Number 15, Gene Simmons. The revelation that took down Gene Simmons wasn't a crime, wasn't a lawsuit, it was a sentence. One sentence that proved everything you thought you knew about him was backwards. July 2014, Songfacts magazine. A journalist asks Gene Simmons about depression. And Simmons, co-founder of Kiss, one of the most theatrical and successful figures in rock history, says on the record that if you're a 20-year-old saying you're depressed, F you, then kill yourself. And then goes further, says he's the guy who says jump when someone's standing on a building threatening to end their life. Why are you announcing it? Shut the f up, have some dignity, and jump. That's not paraphrasing. That's the published interview. I wanna see it in your eyes. Now, you have to understand what Kiss meant to the people who needed them most. 5 decades of building one brand idea. The outsiders are welcome here. The freaks. The kids who didn't fit and knew it. For a generation of teenagers who felt like they had no tribe, that face paint, that wall of sound, that Kiss lunchbox, it was permission. Permission to be loud and weird and refuse to apologize for it. And then Gene Simmons told the most vulnerable version of that person to die. Nikki Sixx went public immediately. Radio stations in Australia banned Kiss entirely. Musicians across the industry issued statements. And fans who'd been loyal for 30, 40 years found themselves staring at everything they'd bought and believed with completely different eyes. Feel the magic. He apologized, said it was spur of the moment. But here's the thing about apologies like that. They only prove you know what you should have said. They don't undo what you actually said. And for a lot of people who grew up believing Gene Simmons was in their corner, that interview was the moment they realized he never really was. I wanna lay it at your feet. Number 14, Jim Morrison / The Doors. Love me one time, babe. Jim Morrison was supposed to be untouchable, not commercially. He was too strange for that. Artistically, mythologically, The Doors made rock feel like literature. Morrison wasn't singing, he was prophesying. The Lizard King, the leather pants poet who stared clean through you, and that image survived his death. Morrison became more of a legend after he died at 27 in Paris. Bigger, more permanent. The biopics only made it worse. Love me one time, babe. And then there's March 1st, 1969, Dinner Key Auditorium, Miami, Florida. Morrison reportedly walked out drunk before the show even started. This was supposed to be the beginning of a comeback, the band rebuilding from some rough months, Miami kicking off a 20-city tour. Instead, he rambled between songs, started ranting at the crowd to take their clothes off. And then, the jury literally could not agree on whether he actually did it. He either exposed himself on stage or convinced 10,000 people he was about to and got away with it. Love me 2 times, I've gone away. He was charged with indecent exposure, open profanity, lewd and lascivious behavior, and public drunkenness. The trial lasted 40 days. The jury convicted him of indecent exposure and profanity, sentenced to 6 months in jail and a $500 fine. Love me 2 times, yeah. And here's what the conviction cost. Every venue on that planned 20-city tour canceled. The Doors were effectively untouchable, in the worst sense of the word. Morrison appealed, flew to Paris while the case moved through the system, died there on July 3, 1971. The appeal was never resolved. He was still a convicted criminal when he died. Florida's Clemency Board issued a posthumous pardon in December 2010. The Lizard King, the poet prophet of a generation, convicted, gone. The version on the t-shirts never mentions any of that.
Love me one time, babe.
Real talk. Only 9% of you are subscribed. That hurts. We're spending hours digging through archives, fact-checking every detail, bringing these stories back to life. And if you're watching this far, you clearly care. So hit subscribe. It's free and takes 2 seconds. Now, to my subscribers, barely any of you have joined the membership. And honestly, that stings even more. You know the work we put in. You keep coming back. If these videos have ever made you feel something, if this music means something to you, join the membership. It's $1 coffee a month and it's the only way we keep this going. Let's build this together. All right, back to it. Number 13, Axl Rose / Guns N' Roses. In 1987, Guns N' Roses released Appetite for Destruction and changed what rock could sound like. You know the album. You know what it felt like the first time you heard it. Raw, dangerous, genuinely threatening in a way rock had stopped being for years. Axl Rose wasn't performing rebellion. He was the thing itself. And for a certain kind of fan, that authenticity was everything. Which makes 1988 so hard to look at straight. GN or Lies, a follow-up EP, half live recordings, half acoustic. Acoustic, it sounds harmless. And then buried at the end is a song called One in a Million. And on that track, Axl Rose used, in the first person, as himself, racial slurs against black people, immigrants, and gay men. Immigrants and faggots, they make no sense to me. They come to our country and think they'll do as they please. That's a direct lyric on a Guns N' Roses record. From the man who supposedly gave a voice to the ones who didn't belong. Here's the thing, the people who needed Guns N' Roses most, the misfits, the kids who felt shut out and rejected, the ones who turned the volume up because it was the only thing that made them feel less alone. Some of those people were the exact people Axl was naming. He drew a boundary and told you which side of it you weren't welcome on. He called it honest, autobiographical. The label tried to make it go away. It didn't. And then July 1991, Riverport Amphitheater in St. Louis. 40 minutes in, Axl spots someone filming in the crowd, jumps off the stage, attacks the guy, yells at security, and walks off. Just leaves. While 60,000 people who drove hours, paid real money, waited in that heat, stand there trying to understand what just happened. The riot injured 60 people. The venue was destroyed. The most dangerous band in the world decided to show you exactly who they were. They were thorough. Number 12, Dennis Wilson / The Beach Boys.
I know she must be kind.
The Beach Boys were summer, literally. Sunshine and surfboards and the sound of California before California got complicated. And Dennis Wilson, the actual surfer in a band of non-surfers, the wild one, the one who looked the part, he was the soul of it. Not the genius. Brian was the genius. But Dennis had the heartbeat. In 1968, he was living in a rented mansion on Sunset Boulevard in Pacific Palisades. One afternoon, he picked up 2 young women hitchhiking and brought them home. That night, he came back to find 20 strangers living in his house. Their leader was a man named Charles Manson. The family stayed for months, running up roughly $100,000 in expenses, using Dennis's cars, his food, his home. And Dennis Wilson, who tended to see the best in people, who was drawn to the wild and unpredictable, let it happen. Because Manson could be genuinely compelling, because Manson had music he wanted heard. The Beach Boys actually recorded a modified version of one of Manson's songs. They changed the title, gave Dennis the writing credit, and released it as a B-side. When Manson found out he'd been cut from the credit, he was furious. And here's the part that doesn't get enough attention. Terry Melcher, Doris Day's son, a record producer connected to the Beach Boys, came to Dennis's house specifically to hear Manson perform. He passed, decided not to sign him. Later, Melcher moved out of a rental property on Cielo Drive in Los Angeles. And Charles Manson knew that address. Sharon Tate moved in. The murders happened August 9, 1969. The line connecting that night runs directly through Dennis Wilson's living room. He drowned in December 1983. He was 39 years old. The sound of California innocence. Number 11, Pete Townshend / The Who. One of the greatest live bands in rock history, full stop. You know Won't Get Fooled Again, you know Baba O'Reilly, and Pete Townshend, the windmill-armed guitarist, the philosopher, the literary force behind Tommy and Quadrophenia, was considered one of rock's genuine thinkers. Not just a musician, an intellectual, a serious artist, untouchable. January 2003, British police knock on Pete Townshend's door. Operation Oar was a massive UK investigation into online child pornography. Townshend's credit card had been used to access a website distributing that material. He was arrested. His computers were seized. Scotland Yard's Child Protection Group spent 4 months on the case. Townshend went public immediately with a statement. He said he had accessed the website once with his credit card to investigate how easily accessible this material was online. He said he himself had been a victim of childhood sexual abuse and that he was researching for a memoir about that experience and a campaign against child exploitation. He said he was trying to expose how simple it was for predators to operate. Police investigated fully. They found no downloaded images on his computers. He was not charged with a criminal offense. He received a police caution and then placed on the sex offenders register for 5 years. Here's what you do with that. You can accept his explanation. You can believe he was doing what he said. But the sex offenders register doesn't care about explanations. It's a list. And Pete Townshend, who wrote about the loss of innocence, who gave a whole generation a voice for their alienation, was on that list for 5 years. Some things, once they attach to a name, don't come off. Number 10, James Brown. James Brown was the blueprint, the godfather of soul, the hardest working man in show business, the man Michael Jackson studied, Prince worshipped, and every funk and hip-hop producer who ever lived built their foundation on. Born into poverty in rural South Carolina, built an empire on raw talent and relentless, obsessive work. You want to talk about someone who earned every inch of their legend? James Brown earned it. And if you grew up with his music in your house, if I Got You was part of the furniture, this one lands differently. His third wife, Adrienne Rodriguez Brown, spent years in a relationship marked by documented physical violence, arrests, police reports, court testimony, multiple incidents on the public record, and the music industry, which adored James Brown's catalog, which needed James Brown's legacy, looked the other way, because that's what the industry did. And then September 1988, James Brown walked into an insurance seminar being held in a building he owned in Augusta, Georgia, carrying a shotgun. When police arrived, he led them on a chase across the state line into South Carolina, multiple officers firing at his truck. He was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 6 years in prison. He served 2.5, the hardest working man in show business, in a cell. He was released in 1991, kept recording, kept performing, and the music industry did what it always does with legends, cleaned up the narrative. The biopics focus on the rise, the genius, the triumph. The chapters that break the monument get quietly trimmed. Adrienne Brown died in January 1996. She was 42. The full picture of what her life had been inside that marriage is documented. We just don't tell it the way we should. Number 9, Eric Clapton. If you needed to name the guitarist who defined what rock guitar sounds like, who wrote the vocabulary, established the standard, you'd start with Clapton. Cream, Derek and the Dominoes, Layla, Crossroads, the man who built his entire career on the blues, on Robert Johnson, on Muddy Waters, on the music black artists created, and brought it to the world. Fans in London had spray-painted Clapton as God on walls. That was the level of reverence. And if Layla was playing in your car, if Clapton was woven into your actual life, you know this one doesn't go away clean. On August 5, 1976, at the Birmingham Odeon, Eric Clapton took the stage between songs and delivered a speech.
This beautiful lady.
He told the audience England was becoming a black colony. He told them to vote for Enoch Powell, the politician whose notorious Rivers of Blood speech had warned against Commonwealth immigration. He reportedly told the crowd to get the wogs out, get the coons out, keep Britain white.
She's wondering what clothes to wear,
he said, with a microphone in his hand, to a full concert hall. I used to be into dope, now I'm into racism. It's much heavier, man. Eric Clapton, who had covered Bob Marley and made a fortune from it, who owed everything, the riffs, the style, the whole identity, to the music black artists invented.
and brushes a long blonde hair.
2 music journalists in that Birmingham audience, Red Saunders and Roger Huddle, wrote an open letter condemning Clapton and sent it to the music press. That letter became the foundation of Rock Against Racism, one of the most significant music-driven political movements in British history.
And I've got an aching head.
Clapton has addressed it since. Called himself a kind of semi-racist, blamed the drink, and addiction does real things to people. But he said those things, into a microphone, as himself. Clapton is God, graffiti on London walls, and 4 years later, he was telling an audience which people didn't deserve to be in the same room with him.
I feel wonderful.
Number 8, John Lennon.
For today.
There are very few names in rock history that function the way John Lennon's name functions. He isn't just a musician, he's a symbol, a secular saint, the man who wrote Imagine, who told an entire world to picture a place without war, without division, without possessions, and was shot for his beliefs. The working-class hero from Liverpool, the martyr, the prophet.
Above us only sky.
And in the months before he was killed, John Lennon sat down with journalist David Sheff for what became one of the most revealing interviews in rock history. And in that interview, Lennon said something no one expected. He said, "I was a hitter. I couldn't express myself, and I hit. I fought men, and I hit women." His words, directly. And then there's Imagine, the anthem, the song that became the shorthand for every hope the 20th century ever had for itself. It was recorded at Tittenhurst Park, Lennon's estate in Berkshire, England. More than 70 acres of Georgian architecture, manicured grounds, one of the most expensive private properties in the country. He sang, "Imagine no possessions from inside a mansion." The footage exists. You can watch it. People contain contradictions, artists especially, and Lennon's admission in that interview was at least honest, more honest than most men who've done the same things and never said a word about it. There's something in that, even if it doesn't undo anything. But here's what it does to the image. The peace sign. War is over. Give peace a chance. The working-class hero who lived in a Dakota apartment and a 70-acre estate. The prophet who, by his own admission, was violent with the people closest to him. He was killed just weeks after that interview hit newsstands. The contradictions never got resolved. They just sit there now, permanent, in the record. Above us, only sky. Number 7. Bill Wyman / The Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones are the most examined band in rock history. Every scandal documented, every excess cataloged. Keith Richards and the drug arrests, Brian Jones and the drowning. And for a long time, one story was treated as little more than tabloid gossip. It shouldn't be. In 1984, Bill Wyman, bassist for the Rolling Stones, 47 years old, attended the BPI Awards, and there he met Mandy Smith. She was 13 years old. Their relationship reportedly began shortly after. According to Smith's own account, it became sexual when she was 14, and it stayed hidden from the public for 2.5 years, until she was 16, the UK's age of consent, at which point the tabloids had a field day. Here's something Wyman wrote in his 1990 autobiography, reflecting on the moment he first saw Mandy Smith at 13. "She took my breath away. She was a woman at 13. He published that in a book under his own name. Mandy Smith and Bill Wyman married in June 1989. She was 18, he was 52. The marriage lasted 23 months. She developed serious health problems. Later in life, she called for the UK age of consent to be raised to 18, saying, "You are still a child, even at 16. You can never get that part of your life back. I never could." And then, because the story wasn't complicated enough, in 1993, Wyman's son Stephen married Mandy Smith's mother, Patsy, which made Bill Wyman, technically, the step-grandfather of his ex-wife. The industry called it gossip. Mandy Smith called it something else. Prosecutors considered charges, never filed them. Wyman kept his place in the band, on the stage, inside the mythology, and the Rolling Stones just kept rolling. Sometimes the revelation isn't only about one person, it's about what everyone around them was willing to accept. Number 6. David Bowie. David Bowie was supposed to be beyond category. That was the whole point. Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, the Thin White Duke, artist as shapeshifter, something that wouldn't hold still long enough for you to define it. He made otherness not just acceptable, he made it aspirational. For a generation that felt like they didn't fit anywhere, Bowie wasn't just music. He was permission to be exactly as strange as you needed to be.
To leave the capsule if you dare.
And then 1976, deep cocaine addiction, living in Los Angeles, and the thin white Duke persona, cold, aristocratic, emotionally evacuated, bleeding into something genuinely disturbing.
Check ignition and may God's love be.
On May 2nd, 1976, Bowie arrived back in London by train at Victoria Station. A crowd of fans waited on the platform. As he stepped out and waved, photographers captured what appeared to be, unmistakably, a Nazi salute. The image went around the world.
There's blue and there's nothing I can do.
Bowie denied it, said the camera had caught him mid-wave at a bad angle. But the photographs weren't the only problem. That same year, in multiple published interviews, Bowie made statements about fascism and Adolf Hitler that stunned people who read them. He described Hitler as one of the first rock stars, said Britain could benefit from a fascist leader, statements he attributed years later to cocaine psychosis.
Ground control to Major Tom.
And that explanation carries real weight, given what that level of addiction does to a mind. What's not in dispute is that he said those things. They were published. They came from the man who had spent a decade telling the world that rigid categories were the enemy.
Here am I sitting in a tin can.
After his death in January 2016, accounts resurfaced about the groupie culture surrounding his early 70s peak, about who had access and how young some of them were. Questions that had existed for years suddenly had a louder audience. He gave the world permission to be other. The revelation was that he was as fallible as anyone else, and in some chapters, worse.
The most peculiar way.
Number 5. Elvis Presley.
Oh, and more.
There is no bigger legend in rock history than Elvis Presley. That's not a close conversation. The music alone settles it. The voice, the records, the way he split history in half. Before Elvis and after Elvis. That's just how the timeline works. And almost all of it was under the control of a man who was, legally speaking, nobody.
Of which I'm certain I've lived.
Colonel Tom Parker managed Elvis from 1955 until his death in 1977. Every major decision, every contract, every concert, every film deal, every Vegas residency. And Parker reportedly took as much as 50% of everything Elvis earned. Not 20, not 25, 50%, which was extraordinary even by the already predatory standards of music management.
I traveled each and every byway.
But here's the thing about Colonel Tom Parker that most people still don't fully sit with. That wasn't his name, and he wasn't American. Colonel Tom Parker was born Andreas Cornelis van Kuyk in Breda, the Netherlands, in 1909.
But through it all, when there was doubt.
He entered the United States illegally in 1929. He never became a naturalized citizen. He never held a valid U.S. passport, and he could not apply for one without revealing who he actually was, which would have exposed his immigration status and potentially led to deportation.
Oh, and more, much more than.
And so, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, never toured outside North America. Not once in his career. Never Europe, never Japan, never Australia, never played for the hundreds of millions of people around the world who would have paid anything to be in the room. Because his manager couldn't leave the country without risking everything.
Yes, there were times.
Elvis wanted to tour internationally. There are documented accounts of him pushing for it, asking for it, being told no, year after year. Parker would find a reason. Another movie deal, another Vegas contract, another domestic run. The king of rock and roll never left the continent because his manager was hiding from immigration. That's not a metaphor. That's what happened.
Careful step along the byway.
Number 4, Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin is, by almost any measure, the greatest hard rock band in history. Page, Plant, Bonham, Jones. Together they built something that's never been replicated. The riffs, the dynamics, the sheer weight of it. From Whole Lotta Love, to Kashmir, to Stairway to Heaven, that catalog is a monument. A significant portion of it was built on music they didn't write.
I'm gonna give you my love.
Whole Lotta Love, one of the defining riffs of hard rock. Willie Dixon had written You Need Love for Muddy Waters in 1962. Put both recordings on. The connection isn't subtle. Dixon sued. He won. He received writing credit and a settlement.
Way down inside.
Bring It On Home. The intro is lifted essentially note for note from Sonny Boy Williamson's song of the same name. Dixon sued again, won again, the Lemon Song. The guitar figures come directly from Howlin' Wolf's Killing Floor. Wolf never received credit. Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You was credited as a traditional folk arrangement by Jimmy Page. It was actually written by Anne Bredon in the late 1950s. Joan Baez had recorded it in 1962. It took years before Bredon was properly credited. And then Stairway to Heaven. The intro bears a remarkable resemblance to a piece called Taurus, written by Randy California of Spirit and recorded in 1968.
Honey, you need it. I'm gonna give you my love.
Led Zeppelin had opened for Spirit on tour that same year. Jimmy Page almost certainly heard it. Randy California spent years fighting for recognition. He drowned in Hawaii in 1997. His estate continued the fight. The Ninth Circuit Court ruled in Led Zeppelin's favor in 2020. But play both recordings side by side. You can hear it. Here's what I keep coming back to. The artists they borrowed from most heavily, Muddy Waters, Willie Dixon, Howlin' Wolf, were black blues musicians who earned a fraction of what Led Zeppelin made from their careers. They weren't the only band doing this, but they were the biggest. The monument is real, and so is the foundation it was built on.
Shake for me, yeah. I wanna be your backdoor man.
Number 3, Chuck Berry.
He used to carry his guitar in a gunny sack. Go sit be-
There is no rock and roll without Chuck Berry. That is not an opinion. That is the timeline. Maybelline, Johnny B. Good, Roll Over Beethoven, rock and roll music, the double string guitar riff, the duck walk, the 3-chord storytelling lyric. He invented the vocabulary.
Deep down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the ever.
The Beatles covered him. Keith Richards said the greatest rock and roll musician of all time was Chuck Berry. John Lennon said, if you tried to give rock and roll another name, you might call it Chuck Berry. And here's what that legacy is actually attached to. In 1959, Chuck Berry was arrested under the Mann Act, the federal law against transporting someone across state lines for immoral purposes. He had brought a 14-year-old girl from Texas to Missouri to work at his club. He was convicted. He served 20 months in federal prison. He came out. The music was still there. He was still the inventor, still the king. And then 1990, a lawsuit was filed by women who worked at and visited his Southern Air restaurant in Wentzville, Missouri. They claimed Berry had installed hidden cameras in the women's restrooms. Over 200 women eventually came forward. He settled the case out of court. 200 women.
Go, Johnny, go, go. Johnny.
And here's the question that doesn't have a clean answer, the one I'm not going to answer for you. What do you do when the person who invented something also did this? You cannot uninvent rock and roll. The music genuinely changed the world, but you cannot pretend the rest of it didn't happen either.
Go, Johnny, go, go. Go.
Some people have worked out how to hold both things at once. Some people can't. I'm not here to tell you which way to go on that, What I'll tell you is this. The man who invented rock and roll went to federal prison and then faced 200 lawsuits, and history still has to put his name first.
Go, Johnny, go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go.
Number 2, Jerry Lee Lewis. In 1957, Jerry Lee Lewis was the most dangerous man in music. That's not hyperbole, that was the consensus at the time. Whole lot of shaking going on, was a revolution on its own. Great balls of fire, Lewis standing up, kicking the piano bench away, hammering the keys like they'd insulted him personally. The music press was terrified of him. Parents were terrified. That was the whole point. He was genuinely competing with Elvis for the title of rock's biggest star, and some people thought he was going to win. And in December 1957, at the height of everything, he married his cousin. She was 13 years old. Myra Gale Brown. Born July 11, 1944, Jerry Lee Lewis married her on December 12, 1957. He was 22. She was his first cousin once removed. It was his third marriage, and his second divorce hadn't been finalized yet, adding bigamy to the situation. He brought Myra to England on tour in May 1958. She was 14 by then. A single journalist at London's Heathrow Airport learned who she was and went to press. Within hours, the story was everywhere. The British tabloids called him a baby snatcher and a cradle robber. The tour collapsed after 3 concerts. He went home. American radio dropped him essentially overnight. His performance fee reportedly fell from $10,000 a night to $250,000. The bookings disappeared, the chart positions vanished. He never fully recovered in mainstream rock. He rebuilt himself as a country artist in the 60s and found genuine success there. He performed into his 80s. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but the version of Jerry Lee Lewis, who was going to be king, the one who was going to outrun Elvis and take everything, that version ended at Heathrow Airport, in one conversation, in May 1958. Number 1, Jimmy Page. We've been building to this one. If you built a Mount Rushmore of rock guitar, and people have this argument all the time with serious feeling, Page is always on that mountain. Heartbreaker, Whole Lotta Love, Stairway to Heaven, Kashmir. He wasn't just a great guitarist, he was an architect. He designed the sound that hard rock lived inside for a generation. The bowing technique, the studio craft, the arrangement intelligence that made Led Zeppelin something other bands could only imitate. Page wasn't playing guitar. He was building something that would outlast everyone in that room. And underneath all of it, there is a documented, detailed, publicly stated account of a relationship with a 14-year-old girl. Her name is Lori Maddox. She has spoken publicly about this in multiple interviews, to Thrillist in 2015 and in Bob Spitz's 2021 biography of Led Zeppelin. She has described how she first met Page when she was 14 years old, how Led Zeppelin's manager had her brought to Page's hotel suite in Los Angeles, how she became, in her own telling, his girlfriend. How the relationship lasted more than 2 years, until she was 16. How Page had her kept in hotel rooms during tours and traveled separately from her to avoid being seen together. Page was 29 when they met. He has never publicly denied the relationship. In the Spitz biography, the 3 surviving members of Led Zeppelin, Plant, Jones, and Page, declined to address it. Their cooperation with the biography reportedly ended the day after the Me Too movement broke publicly. Spitz noted it in the book. The timing speaks for itself. Here's what I keep thinking about. Jimmy Page is one of the most decorated figures in rock history. Interviewed hundreds of times, his guitar work analyzed, praised, and studied for 50 years, and what Lori Maddox described, in her own words, corroborated by multiple sources, has sat in the public record for years. And for decades, the industry decided to look somewhere else. The greatest rock guitarist who ever lived, and a girl who was 14 years old. That's not a footnote. The fact that it was treated as one, for as long as it was, says something about what rock music decided it was willing to see, and what it decided it wasn't.